Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 30 something. I think we're probably in the 30s at this point of my Fire Emblem 6 hard mode chapter guide. We're getting extremely close to the end of the game, as I said last time. As I said before, if you did not get all the divine weapons, the last chapter was the previous chapter, but if you did, you get 2 additional chapters, sort of 3, but we'll be doing one part after this. So we're getting, as I said, really close to the end. Now this chapter is pretty straightforward, I will say. As we can see, I am just starting with a map, as I've been doing lately. Now, the beauty of this chapter, as opposed to the previous chapter, and most certainly 2 chapters ago, where just a bunch of wyverns were spawning all the time, is that there is no reinforcements on this chapter. This is, from the story's perspective, sort of like the last stand of Burn. So there are no reinforcements on this chapter. So what you see is what you get. None will spawn when the chapter starts or anything like that, which means that honestly there just aren't a ton of units to deal with on this chapter. I mean, there are a decent amount, as you can see, and obviously as we've been fighting both wyverns and druids, of which there are a bunch, and manikeets, there's a few of those, are all really difficult to deal with units. So I'm not going to say that this is like some ridiculously easy chapter, right? But it is fairly straightforward. This chapter is mostly about just handling the groups of wyverns that are going to charge at you from the beginning. I believe all the groups of wyverns will move relatively quickly on the chapter, but you can kind of handle them one at a time. You should, of course, have a very strong team at this point. There are some ballistas in the middle, but as long as one of your flyers has the Delphi shield, they're not too difficult to deal with, or you could just wait them out. That is also a pretty nice strategy. The other thing that I want to mention before we start is that, while you do see a lot of druids on this chapter, only the druids that are around the boss, excuse me, only the druids that are around the boss actually have any kind of status devs. So there's 3 other druids that are kind of scattered around the maps. I think one of these has physic, but none of them have any like siege tomes or status devs, nothing like that. Once you get close to the boss, this chapter can actually get a little tedious, just because I think 3 of those druids do have status devs. I think like 2 have sleep, 1 has berserk, something along those lines. And then the boss, who's a very strong sage, has bolting. So sort of approaching at the end there can be a little tedious, and you got to be a little bit careful. But that's really the only part of the chapter where you need to like slow down or be that careful. As long as you're dealing with the wyverns, as we've been dealing with the wyverns, and in a reasonable fashion. So yeah, like I said, there's not a ton to talk about other than that. There is a little bit with the preps. There's a new unit we're going to be getting on this chapter, so I'll talk about that. Yeah, let's get right into the chapter. Alright, so really quick, I just want to talk about the preps. The one unit that you do need to bring if you want to recruit the unit on this chapter is for Bartrey also works. We're going to be recruiting Corel, which if you've played Fire Emblem 7, you're familiar at least with relatively who he is. It's not super important that you do recruit this unit, so I wouldn't worry too much if you lost both those units. You can't even recruit Bartrey if you chose one of the paths, so... but he can be kind of nice. We'll talk about him more when we recruit him, but yeah. Bring Fur, you just need to get to this village over here, so not too much to worry about. And then I just want to show off a little bit. As I said, these druids do not have any status devs, so don't worry too much about them. Then we have Berserk, we have Sleep, and then we have another Sleep. Yeah, so this guy doesn't have anything, but still, this can be pretty annoying to deal with. And then the boss has Bolting. Also a Guiding Ring you can steal. I don't really know why they gave a Hero's Crest, a Nice Crest, and a Guiding Ring this late in the game. I think it's a little funny, but you can do it if you really want to promote somebody, I guess, at this point. She does have Cap Magic. That doesn't increase the range of bolting, unlike the status devs, but it does increase the damage, of course. So 43 damage is not nothing. She's pretty darn strong, and it only weighs 10 in this game, which means she still has 18 speed when doing it. So you gotta be really careful with like Roy, for example. She can probably obliterate your Roy, unless you've gone really all in on training him. The last thing I want to mention before we start is divine weapons. I've been preaching, do not use your divine weapons. Be careful with them, because if a character dies or you overuse them, you won't have them. At this point, you can do whatever you want with them. I would recommend at least saving your more powerful ones for the next chapter. We're going to be fighting... The next chapter is just straight up Manikeets. So Wormslayers, but most importantly, Divine Weapons are incredibly strong there. I wouldn't worry about it too much. You just need like a few, specifically on your good units. Like if you have a good Lou, you can just sort of go around 4 blazing everyone you want. And you can hammer in these things if you have access to that, but yeah. You can be pretty judicious with using them at this point, but just be a little careful, you know. But yeah, there's not much else to talk about. As I said, I'll probably have Milady push here and just kind of handle the troops. I'll probably come back and talk about Corel, and then maybe when we get around here, I'll come back. But yeah, this chapter is pretty darn straightforward. Alright, so like I said, if you visit this house with either Fur or Bartrey, we get to recruit Corel. Now, Corel is the final recruitable character in the game, unless you count trial map characters, I guess. He is a level 19 Swordmaster, actually has some of the highest growths in like all of Fire Emblem. I don't really know. I don't know. It's kind of cool, I guess. You can get him a level, but honestly, he's kind of mediocre. Obviously, his stats look pretty insane, to be honest, but you have to understand, like, this is Fire Emblem 6. Your Rucker will probably be a lot stronger than this, and basically all of your other characters. But I do think that Corel is fairly useful for a few different reasons. Number one is that he does come with S swords. Now, at this point, you'll probably have somebody that can use the Durandal. In the case of Rucker is obviously a good example. But yeah, any of your Cavs, Percival, you know, stuff like that. But if you, for some reason, have nobody that can use it, or you just have a really screwed Rucker or something, Corel can do that. The other reason, and I actually think this does make him fairly useful and a decent choice to bring to the final chapter, is that other than most magic and, of course, the divine weapons, the Wormslayer is probably your best bet at actually dealing some damage to Manikeets. And Corel can, of course, just use that straight up. And 20 strength is pretty darn good. His bulk is okay, too. So he's not a very good unit, let's face it. Arguably, he's the worst unit in the game because a decent amount of playthroughs will just never get him. But no, he definitely has his uses, and I think he's fairly useful. If you have the opportunity to recruit him, I think it's a decent choice. And like I said, I do think he has some uses in the final chapter, but yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about him. But yeah. So at this point, I have Milady handling a group. I have Gonzalez. You can use these forest tiles strategically, of course, as we've been doing. Dealing with them pretty easily. As I said before, Roy actually does a lot of damage to Manikeets. I'll probably wind up rescue dropping him because I don't want him to take on these Wyverns along with Fur. But yeah, just deal with the Wyverns as they come. And like I said, the first part of this chapter is pretty darn straightforward. Okay, so I said that most of this chapter is pretty straightforward. Let's talk about the end really quick. As you can see, I have a line of sleeping units here and a Berserk Gonzalez. So these units, despite having a ton of range, do not move, which is kind of nice, but you can see just how much range they have, considering they hit me all the way over here. I will say, I didn't mention this at the top, I probably should have. You can push this guy just fine. Milady standing, I think anywhere around this guy is totally fine, or any of your flyers. But these guys are pretty sketchy, because it's likely that you'll be in the Berserk guy's range. I believe this guy's Berserk, yeah. And I think he can reach to, like, even around this guy, so I would not recommend pushing these ballistas. I think it's actually pretty dangerous. Like I said, I should have mentioned that at the top, but yeah, these guys, they can be pretty annoying. I will say, if you do push the ballistas, one time I had Milady go all the way out here to distract the Wyverns. She got Berserk. That can be really frustrating. This is where the Saint Staff, I talked about this last time, but the Saint Staff is extremely useful because you can basically recover at range. It's the only staff that can do that. But yeah, Restore Staffs are extremely useful here. There's nothing that's going to come out and attack you. Like, these Wyverns I think are moving, and obviously this guy is, but none of these units will, so you can kind of wait out the sleeps if you want, if you don't have enough, like, Restore Staffs. After this chapter, we will not need Restore at all. Like I said, it's just Manikeets from here on out, so nothing's going to Berserk you or sleep you or anything. So yeah, so you can use them a bunch here if you want to complete it fast, or you can wait out the sleeps. It's your choice, but obviously make sure that you're dealing with the Berserk. And then yeah, after that, I believe these units don't ever move. And then I think this guy might, maybe not, but it's a little bit sketchy because trying to find units that can, like, potentially take a bolting from her and take fluxes from these guys or Nosferatus from these guys is pretty sketchy. But I believe these units don't move. But I guess we'll play around with that in a minute here. But yeah, just be really careful with the staffs. Make sure you got Restorers and the Saint Staff is extremely useful. Okay, so let's talk about the AI at the end of this chapter, because I'm not really sure what's going on here. So these guys have at this point abused or used all of their status. They do all have physic, although none of them heal this Manikeet, which is interesting. Obviously, as I said, the boss has bolting. Now, this Manikeet does move and attack. He just attacked my Lu. But these units do not. These snipers, on the other hand, and I believe the druids will also do this. I have no clue why it works this way. I was trying to remember how the AI worked, and that's why I waited to talk about it until now. For some reason, they just walk up and stand right next to you. I don't really know why. This happens, like, sometimes in some of the games. But yeah, so I guess you just have to be worried about the boss and then the Manikeets, because I'm not really sure what's going on with these snipers. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward from here on out. I have Lu who can take on the boss's bolting pretty easily. I'm just going to kill this Manikeet and then probably bait out her 5 boltings, or 4 more, and then I'll move in. And yeah, I'll update if the AI does anything else weird, but I think they're just going to kind of stand there, and you can just kind of pick them off at your own whenever you want. I didn't mention the shops in this chapter. There's like silver weapons and good magic and stuff. I'll just mention it really quick. Like I said, you really only want Worm Slayers and Divine Weapons on the next chapter. Strong Magic is useful. That can still hit the Manichees pretty darn hard, so you may want to buy some of that if you're lacking it. But I wouldn't worry too much about like buying stuff. Certainly if you have money left over, you can go that route, but it's up to you. But yeah, let's take out this Manichee. Hopefully I don't miss a 94%. And then yeah, we'll just wait out the boss's boltings, and then we'll take her out. Okay, really quick, let's talk about the AI one more time. I don't really know what's going on with them, so these druids, after the sniper all walked up and stood around Lou, and they didn't do anything, and then last turn they all attacked Lou, so thankfully it wasn't a problem for my Lou. It seems like they need to take a turn to walk up to your unit and then attack the unit. I'm not really sure. I don't know, I wouldn't worry too much about these units. They don't seem to be really doing much of anything. And thankfully a lot of them seem to have Flux and not Nosferatu, so it's not as scary. This guy didn't move at all, so yeah, I don't really know. It's a bit odd. But yeah, just use a unit you trust, and you should be alright around here. Alright, finally, once you've dealt with whatever that AI was trying to do, you have the boss to contend with. I already showed her stats. She is quite strong. Like most bosses, you can just kind of surround her. She does get a gate bonus here, obviously, but she doesn't have too much health, which is kind of nice. You can see how my like really strong Shin doesn't look that good against her, but I wouldn't worry too much about her. I mean, you can surround her, and most bosses aren't too bad. This isn't a siege or anything, so once she is dead, you can move on. Alright, and finally we defeat the boss. By the way, they reuse this music. Super dope music. Absolutely love this music. But yeah, after she's dead, like I said, you don't have to seize or anything. We can see one of my Shin level ups really quick. But yeah, after this we move on to what is essentially the final chapter. There is a short little thing afterwards. You actually do have to seize. Okay, I'm an idiot. So I'm gonna seize, but yeah, just one more episode left. I'll go over the last 2 chapters in that because the last one really isn't much of a chapter. Like I said, really what you want to know is you just have Divine Weapons and Worm Slayers. And it should be pretty straightforward. I'll say this right now, if you want the good ending, and I'll talk about that more next time, you do need Fa alive and Roy to kill the final boss. I mentioned this a bunch of times as well, but you don't need to train Roy at all. He will be strong enough to defeat the final boss. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. I will see you next time, and we will conclude this series. Thanks everybody for watching.